So do I have anyone that memorized 1 Corinthians 1:10 in the house? All right. Yeah, I tell you. Man. Whew. You know, it's always interesting. Over the years, I've noticed when you have Vacation Bible School, there are some classes where the students have their verses memorized, and others, the kids are struggling with it. But I've always noticed that there was always a sound of, you want us to memorize in the adult class type of situation. But I guess, being a preacher, they had us memorizing 200-300 scriptures throughout the time we were in preaching school. And it was always, sometimes they would have us say them out verbally, but sometimes they would just have us write every verse out. And so we had a couple of our teachers, they would actually read through all of that and make sure, and they had what they call a red pen. And some of you guys that are familiar with going to school and professors, a professor that was good at marking red marks, they received an IV bag full of red ink with a pen at the end because they marked everybody. They were sticklers about everything you did wrong. And so I'm not trying to do that, and I don't want that IV, but I'm just trying to encourage memorization. Tommy?
So you may not know this unless you were a little bit older, Solomon, but once you get a little bit older, I feel like if I memorize a new verse, it's going to kick another one out.
Limited capability. Oh, man, I tell you. Oh, wow. We're going to have to talk about fasting next, my friend. Yeah, we're going to talk about fasting next. But, yeah, okay, I'm not old enough. I keep hearing that. It's like, man, 51. And it's so funny, you're just like, okay, I keep hearing this. You're just a kid. And I'm just like, wow, how old do I need to be? Wow. Maybe when I get 103, there might be somebody that's younger than me or more younger than me. But I'm sure there's going to be some senior citizen that's older than 103 telling me, well, son, back in our days. So there's always that. That's hilarious. But no, the example I probably gave you weeks ago when I was talking about memorization, I talked about a lady named Monette Taylor. I had suggested to the congregation in Benicia, we were going through the book of Ephesians on Sunday evenings, and I asked the church to memorize all of the walk passages. I didn't give an offering of coffee cards or any type of motivation as such. I just said, if you just memorize, let's see who can memorize all of the walk passages. And I remember after maybe 3 weeks, Monette Taylor, as she was coming in on a Sunday evening, she said, okay, Solomon, sit down. I'm going to tell you all of the scriptures. And Monette Taylor, at the age of, I think she was 85 or 86, she quoted all of the walk passages in the book of Ephesians. And so, granted, she said that Ephesians is one of her favorite epistles, but she was able to quote without looking at anything all of the walk passages of Ephesians. And so I always tell people, you memorize what you repeat in your head. You memorize what you exercise. You memorize all of the things that you repeat in your mind. And I think I mentioned the day that I was suggesting memorization, I was saying that it's interesting with the mind, and Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think I got an expert in the audience. But I'm not. I'll leave you alone if you don't want to participate. But it's always interesting that if I were to ask you about something that happened to you in kindergarten or elementary or a bully or something of that nature, you would remember that very well. And we are well into our 50s in here. I think everybody, well, some of you guys aren't. Yeah, some of you guys aren't in your 50s. What did you say? Yeah, and definitely back here on the left side, we're just starting our 20s. So, yes. Raise your hand if you're in your 20s. Oh, Bible says, lie not to one another. Scoot over, Jane. Wow, man. All right. I think the ice is broken. So now we are moving on out of the section about division. I believe we have exhausted that section there. Now we're going to move forward into the section of true wisdom versus worldly wisdom, starting at 1 Corinthians 1:18. And so I think some of you guys have the outline, the fill in the blanks, and I know some of you may not. But I believe that Mike emailed whoever is on the email list those particular, I think all of the questions for all the lessons. It's like 8 lessons, but we've been in lesson 1 for about 3 weeks. So if you're on that list, you should have received it. If you haven't, we'll have to get you a paper copy if you didn't see it, or have Mike send it back out. And so true wisdom versus worldly wisdom. And that would consist of 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 18, all the way to 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 16. Well, we want to begin by just, first of all, looking at verses 18 through 25. He says, "For the word of the cross is to those who are perishing foolishness, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside. Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God, God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. For indeed Jews ask for signs, and Greeks search for wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, to Jews a stumbling block, and to Gentiles foolishness. But to those who are the called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men." And so we have here in this particular section, we'll be dealing with true wisdom versus worldly wisdom. I guess the first question we can begin with is, what is wisdom? Well, what is wisdom? Richard, and then Pat. The correct application of knowledge. Pretty good. Pat. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. All right. Yes. Arriving at reasoned, accurate decisions.
I think what separates wisdom from knowledge is that it's decision making.
Decision making.
I'm agree here, but it's about making the right decision based on the knowledge that you apply.
Okay. Okay. All right. Tristal.
Wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge, experience, and insight to making good judgment and navigating.
Okay. So with the 4 different things mentioned, I think that brings it pretty close. Yes?
I agree with everything that's been said, but I'd like to add
Yes.
in some way, shape, or form, it has to have the flavor of also experience,
Okay.
of having done that, having seen that. You know what I'm saying? It has to have some of that.
It has to have some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's true as well. There are some times where, like I like to read the Proverbs and the warnings of Solomon, and not having to do those experiences to make good rational decisions, because it's like being the younger kid. Oh wow, got water. It's like being the younger child. You've watched your older siblings make decisions, and you've seen them make good decisions as well as bad. So wisdom also, it does need experience, but also you can utilize the experience of others. Is what I'm trying to convey. Is you can use the wisdom of others. So I think it balances it out, because you don't want to have to go out and experiment over something that you already know is not a good thing. You see one person walk off the roof and they don't fly, unless you want to experience that, you know. So, but I understand exactly what you're saying, Tommy, about the experience. You got to have experience. Tristal?
I agree with what everyone has said too, but Robert just there's two types of wisdom. There's
Correct.
man's wisdom and godly wisdom.
Yes.
And God says that any man that likes wisdom, ask and he gives it to us freely.
Yes.
So godly wisdom is the ultimate.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we're talking about today, is we're looking at or comparing the wisdom of God with the wisdom of man. And we see here that as Paul is writing to a Gentile audience, specifically in Corinth, he's talking about and comparing, as he's writing to these folks, that there are two different types of wisdoms. And the reason why he's saying that is because the way that we look at things from our perspective is different than the way God looks at things from his perspective. Because an individual can only speak and act and decide from the information they have in their minds, and then the amount of information they can access. Because we have a lot of information. We've memorized a lot of things, but we can't always access them. And I think that's what Tommy was mentioning earlier. You know, if we memorize something else, we might have to push something else out. And sometimes that is definitely the case. I've experienced that before, 20 years ago or longer, when I was in preaching school, trying to memorize New American Standard Update and letting go of the King James. But unfortunately, I'm just getting more space, because sometimes when I'm up preaching and I'm reading a text and I'm looking at the words, the King James wants to come out of my mouth. But I have to check myself and say, no, Solomon, this is what it says. And my message and my preaching were not in persuasive words. And so human beings, we are speaking and teaching and reasoning from our perspective. And so is the wisdom of the world. And even as we look at the Word of God, we can only reason with our limited point of view, God's Word. That's why you have so many people with so many different views, because people have different experiences. Even the person sitting next to you that's your spouse, their experiences are different than yours. Because if you let them drive, it's a different experience than when you drive. Hello? And I'm just saying something that is very observable. Now, when you start looking at God's wisdom and why God decided to send his son to die on the cross for our sins, people were saying, Solomon, couldn't God have just said, all you guys' sins are forgiven? He's God. But see, that's speaking from the perspective of the wisdom of men. That's the perspective. God's perspective was, no, there has to be a sacrifice. In fact, when you look at the scriptures, it talks about God sending a sacrifice. And that sacrifice, of course, was going to be Jesus Christ. That's the way it was going to be. The prophecies, as you look at the prophecies throughout the Old Testament, you start seeing them unfold in the New Testament. But there's a buildup from the old as the line, the lineage, Gentile Jew is all mixed up and everything, but here comes Jesus being born at the right time in order to carry out the mission that God had prepared before the foundations of the earth. Before all of this was made, all of that is carried out. It was God's wisdom. Man's wisdom would say, oh, couldn't he have just taken care of it in the garden? Why didn't he do it back then? Because he decided to do it that way. In his wisdom, in his understanding, he decided to do it that way. And so when you look at all of us as we're able to walk around, if we had to decide how to have human beings on the earth, I don't think we would have even been made out of clay into the form of man, because we would have been debating. But then we wouldn't have even been here because we weren't created, because there is God and we're not eternal. And so that ends that debate right there, because God's perspective is different than our perspective. God is the creator. We are the created. Even Satan is different than God, because Satan is created. So his whole perspective in having a desire to be God is ridiculous, but that's the case. And even ourselves, we look at life and we say, I want to be the best, I want to do this, I want to do that, but we're still not God. We're not the creator. And so our perspective is different, and that's why the wisdom of God, like the writer says in 1 Corinthians, is greater, or the foolishness of God is greater than the wisdom of man. Isn't that the way it says it there? That's the way it says it. It's because the perspective is different. But not only the perspective is different, God is the creator. We are the created. It almost is just like our children. We say, well, I'm the parent and this is the child. Their perspective is very limited to what happened before them. Sometimes the children don't understand that we were people before we had kids. We were doing all sorts of things before they showed up on the scene. And so they'll look at the pictures and they're like, that was you? Sometimes they say, you had a full head of hair? Or you look like this? You didn't have wrinkles on your face? You know, that's the way it is. And then we as adults, even though as old as we get, we can look and say, wow, that star was here before I was here. Maybe somebody else saw it 500 years ago, you know, depending on how long the stars were up there. We don't always know. Sometimes we guess about all these things, but we know the sun's been there, unless we got a new sun. I don't know. It seems like it's the same sun, but it disappears every night. So I don't know. Maybe a new light bulb's put in it. But all I'm trying to convey is that God has a different perspective because he's the creator, and we have a different perspective because we're created. There's a big difference. And then you notice that even the people around you, everyone out here, if they were to give a critique on what I'm talking about, the critiques would be similar in some ways, but then they would be different in their own way. See, I put myself on the spot. But then if I was to sit here and give a critique on all of you as students, Richard, huh? What do you think, Richard? What do you think? What do you think? But that's how it is. Because the perspective is that in a congregation, the critique is always on the leadership, on the preacher and everyone else. But if the preacher and the elders and deacons were to start giving a perspective and a critique on the members, the people that come to church, then, we're out of order. But that's perspective. That's perspective. And how we view things and how we view people. And that's just the way that it is. But we know that the reason why God sent his son was because that was the best way to do it. That was the way to do it. It gives us as people the option to either decide to accept Christ or not, because we're free mortal agents. He didn't just force us to do it. He allows us to make an educated decision because we have intellect, don't we all? We all have intellect. We're in our right mind, like the old preachers and men that would get up and pray. Thank God we're in our right mind. I woke up this morning in my right mind. Did you guys? I think it's right. All right. You're in your wrong mind. I don't know what that looks like. All right. All right. So let's look at this. Let's look at this text. Going back to verse 18. He says this. He starts off with this. He says, "For the word of the cross is to those who are perishing foolishness, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God." Now, is that true? That's true. So that's one reason why you believe it's true. Somebody else, why do you believe that this is true? Because he's making a comparison there just in verse 18. What is the word of the cross, first of all? The sacrifice, the death of Christ. Salvation. Okay. So the word of the cross. Could the word of the cross also mean that the sacrifice and the whole picture of the gospel? But specifically, when you say the cross, you're thinking about his death, his sacrifice. And he's saying the conclusion he makes with that, in just that those few words, the word of the cross is to those who are perishing, is foolishness. Now, we didn't define foolishness. What is foolishness? Says the crowd. Anyone? Man's wisdom. Okay. Lack of wisdom. Yes. Yes, the moral failing. Anyone else dealing with this term, the foolishness? Oh, sorry. Those that are perishing? Okay. Can you read that? Your verse 18?
For the word of the cross is falling to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God.
Okay. All right. So the foolishness would be somebody's perspective of what God has done here. That God used the cross, the message of the cross, his son to die on the cross. That's foolishness to those that are perishing. Now, do I have anybody here that can tell me how you viewed the gospel message before you obeyed the gospel? Or was there ever a time you looked at the gospel as foolishness? It's okay to say it. Yes? Okay. 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 So for some, it. Oh, Evan, I didn't even. You got it. You must have did like this. Oh, okay. 'Cause I didn't even see it. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's growing up, it's like my mom bought me the children's Bible and all that, and I'd look at it, read it, and it's for me it was I really didn't understand it,
Mm-hmm.
and then when it started to make sense, the day it made sense was. I've said this before. I was up on the telephone pole. It's like I was never scared to climb. And I looked around. It's like if this pole breaks, I'm going to die and go to hell. So when you realize that your soul is in jeopardy, then it becomes real.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Wow. Liz and Tommy.
A common analogy that atheists use is the flying spaghetti monster. Have you heard of that?
No.
So they say you can't prove there's a flying spaghetti monster, and you can't prove there's not a flying spaghetti monster. It's like a thing that they use in their arguments. And that is pure silliness. It's pure absurdity. And that, to me, is what I'm thinking of, because to them, that's what the gospel is.
Yes.
It's like a flying spaghetti monster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, then, Tommy. Thanks, Liz. Now I've got to look that one up, Liz. A flying spaghetti monster. Okay.
So, our adversary is perfectly content with us not having any thoughts, spiritual thoughts whatsoever. And in fact, if you get busy enough in your life, you can live a life of virtually no spirituality at all. And he's perfectly okay with that. But here's what happens. If you try to live like that, eventually you'll be slapped in the face by things that are truly deep from God. A death in the family. How many of you guys remember when you first held your first child, what that felt like?
Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah.
Even if you don't try to follow him, he's going to put all these little things in your life to try to pull you back to him. A death in the family, a death of your mother, a death of a spouse, all of this stuff is designed to do a course correct, to make you think maybe there's more to life than just being a baby and being put in a box eventually.
Yes.
God does that.
Yes.
Yep.
Definitely. Definitely. Yep. Oh, Richard?
So a couple things. One, God tells us, thank goodness, why his son had to die on the cross. He doesn't leave that to our conjecture.
Yeah.
So by cluing into that perspective of why, then we can align ourselves with his perspective.
Yeah.
So he tells us that it's because he's a righteous God and that he is a just God. And he could not be that. That is his nature. He could not be that if he just willy-nilly, oh, you're okay and you're not, and you're okay and you're not, or, oh, everybody's okay. It can't be done that way.
Yeah.
So he has his standard that he measures everything by, whether it's right or wrong. And we all do it. It's in our nature.
Yeah.
This is right, that's wrong, and this is why. He tells us why so that we can align our perspective with his and say, okay, yes, I can see why his son had to die, why it couldn't be me, because I couldn't live a perfect life. And so he tells us from the beginning that that was the plan, and that's how we get aligned spiritually.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So the foolishness that those that are perishing have, or we talk about foolishness in the sense that people are talking, it's nonsense. But when you talk about from God's perspective, what foolishness is how people view things incorrectly. Their foolishness is something that doesn't align with God. Everything that's not true, that would be foolishness. And it doesn't align with God, or you can say the study of godliness altogether. Yeah, you had some?
Yeah. I always like to look at Romans, the first chapter, usually starting in verse 18.
Mm-hmm.
And, it tells you, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth.
Yeah.
And then this one here, for what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. So you can see it. It's all, it's all around us.
Yeah.
But when you want to reject it or come up with, this wisdom of men, evolution or whatever, it's foolishness. It's ridiculous. And some people fall for it.
Yes, definitely.
Because they don't want to, they think God is going to hold them down or something.
Yes.
Yeah,
because there's this new term I keep hearing is this term receipts. Anybody hear that term receipts? There are so many receipts that God created the heavens and the earth. In fact, all of us are receipts to show that God created mankind, because it's so obvious. I mean, I've mentioned before many times over the years that the proof that there is a God is that, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at Pat. I'm looking at Jane. I'm looking at Sarah. I'm looking at all of you. That's proof that there is a God. If you got on a airline right now and flew to Rome, you could call me from over there. And I had absolutely nothing to do with that. So I know that there is a God. There is a God. Even if our president was removed and moved to Rome and places the Pope over there, and the Pope became president. No, I'm just saying, those two people would still exist, and it's because of God. It's what God said. When God spoke, let us make man in our own image. And he breathed the breath of life into the clay called Adam, said, and now Adam's a living soul. And from that point on, when he and Eve came together, they started creating. And from that point on, you look at all the many people in the world. I've been not all over the world yet, but I've been all over the world, and I see all these people walking around. I go to the airport, I see all these people walking around. I see the airplanes flying. How does that big junk fly through the air? It's because it's following the rules that God has put into place. That's why it can go up in the air the way it does. Because little me, I weigh 300 some pounds, compared to that big thing, I can't fly unless I get in one of those. Now, all of these rules were set by God. And you look at people that walk around, just look around the room. There's a God. God has put all of this into place. And it had nothing to do with the wisdom of man. It's all the wisdom of God. How can you get, even with the limited ability that they say you have when you get older, still all the information that you contain in your brain is more than most computers. I know they keep saying that these computers, like this funny little phone, let me see if I can get it out. This little bitty phone has a lot of information, but I can access information in my brain faster than I can get it out of here. Still learning how to use this. But there has to be a God. This is the wisdom of man here. But God's wisdom is far greater. Yes, Evelyn?
And I just look at the things around us.
Yes.
You know, like you say, the stars and the sky and just all these different things that are in the world. And it's like it has to be a being that is just more powerful than we can even really imagine, that is responsible for all this. You know, when you really think about what it takes to even make a human and the
Yes.
timing and and then these little organs or whatever come together to make a person that can walk into, just all the wonderment. If you really sit back and take a look at all the things that are going on
Yeah.
in the world, it has to be this great, powerful being that is responsible for that. So when I do come across people who, like Liz was saying, we don't have any proof of that, but you do have proof. You're looking at the proof. And so I think if you take a step back and just look at all the things that have been created and how they all mesh and come together, that you'd have a different perspective. That's just how I look at it.
Yes. Yeah. It's to me, it's just amazing. And I always say it like this. It's amazing with the limited knowledge that we have. And I'll say that, the limited knowledge that we have. Don't be offended. Or you can be. But the limited knowledge that we have, we're still able to grasp that there is a God. We're still able to grasp that if we start treating people the way the Bible tells us to treat people, things as simple as loving our neighbor as ourselves, we have a better social situation. We have better interactions if we think about what we say before we say it to people. I think I used the acronym once, THINK. When you're talking to people, if you just think, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Wow. That has so much power in it. And it keeps you from saying things that are unnecessary. I'll put it that way. They're unnecessary. They're not essential to growing a positive relationship. Because sometimes we have things in our heads, in our minds, and we haven't really thought about it. We haven't had our coffee yet. Or we're tired and we need to execute what we were taught in preschool, kindergarten, TK, milk, graham crackers, nap. You guys like it? Y'all like that? The wisdom, that's some wisdom for you. Some people forget that. You guys got it? What is it? Milk, graham crackers, nap. You guys got it? 3-point sermon. It's 3 points. You got to remember it, People in Cortez didn't like it, but they need to use it. Go ahead, one more. Yeah.
So something changed in me that was deeply profound. Can you hear me?
Yes.
About it was around the early of August when we had a chance to go and look at the human body exhibit in Vegas, and I actually got to hold a brain in my hands. And ever since then, I can't stop thinking about the human brain. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe, and this just an opinion, that nothing that God made is more beautiful and sophisticated and complex than the organ that sits between your ears. It is just magnificent, and it does things that even to this day we're not aware of. Solomon, we're just scratching the surface on how the brain even works.
Amen.
They're finding stuff all the time. They used to think that, your brain only changes when you're young. Your brain changes constantly throughout your life, chemically, structurally, and this is from our Creator. And in giving us this brain that can do that, we have some shot of trying to understand him.
Yes.
And it's by only that brain that he gave us, it's so magnificent, that we even have a shot of doing that.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
really, it's amazing.
Yes. Exactly. So we'll end on that note. It's good. All right.